Dog Works Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
Start your day tomorrow with The Daily Dog with Michelle Forto, the morning podcast on Dog Works Radio. Apple Podcast reviewer Patty Christensen calls it funny, smart, and filled with all the info I want to know about dogs. I love this show. Wake up with The Daily Dog. Available on Dog Works Radio on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your shows.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and you can find all of our episodes over on DogWorksRadio.com. You can also find us on social media. Just search for the same, DogWorks Radio. And joining us from California is our co-host. His name is Alex Stein. Alex, how's it going?
It's going great, Robert. I'm really starting to get into the racing fever part of the year. We have the Yukon Quest is going on right now, and Iditarod is set to kick off in just a few weeks. So we're really starting to get into the thick of things.
We are, and as you mentioned, the Yukon Quest is making its way down the trail. The leaders of that race are just passing, I guess it's called Slavens, and then they're heading off to Eagle, and then they'll cross over the international border there and head into Dawson City. But also, as we're talking, the Yukon Quest 300 just finished just a couple of hours ago. I'm not quite sure who won that race. I know, I think it's a husband and wife or a couple were running neck and neck for first and second, so they're pretty close to finishing if they haven't already. And what is very interesting, Alex, you and I talked about this off air a couple of days ago, is Nick Pettit won his fourth race in a row, winning the Willow 300 race last weekend. What is going on with Nick this year?
Nick really seems to be burning up the trails. And, you know, we talked about him a little bit at the end of Iditarod last year, and he was definitely someone that we were both really, really impressed with. And going into this year with Dallas Seavey not competing, I've got to think that he would be a very, very serious competitor to win the Iditarod.
Right. You know, that is going to be my pick for this year. I know we also talked off air, and we still would love to have a woman finish the race and win it. Who are your picks if we're going into it about a month premature here?
You know, I always want Ali Zirkle to win, but I'm thinking that it might be a year for a different woman, maybe someone like Michelle Phillips or Paige Drobny might be able to come out on top. I mean, I'm horrible at making predictions, but you always seem to rope me into making predictions, which then prove to be completely wrong.
Well, you know, that's sort of the nature of the beast, isn't it? We have to predict something somehow. Otherwise, we're just going into it blind.
Right. And, you know, I would still not count out any of a half dozen competitors, including Jeff King, including certainly Mitch Seavey, Nick Pettit, and, you know, it looks like it's going to be a very, very good field this year.
So if you had to think about sort of that top 10, would you count anybody out that's normally there? I don't think we have any really fanciful newcomer to the race. You know, somebody that's been out of it for several years and is making a comeback. Who do you think is going to round out that those big money spots?
Well, I would have to take a look at the list, but I am not looking at anyone who would be too surprising. I'm not looking at anyone to come and have a top 10 finish who hasn't been at least in the top 15 or top 20 in the past few years.
Yeah, I agree with you there for sure. Just a quick update on that Yukon Quest 300. Ben Good won the race, followed by Joanna Jagow, I believe is how you pronounce her name. And then in third place was just an interview we did last week is Richie Betty from Wild Things Dog Mushing. If you haven't heard that interview, find it out on our feed. It's a great interview, and he's one heck of a guy.
Yeah, very, very, very exciting stuff in the Yukon Quest 300. There was a story a couple days ago that people might have seen, where Ellen King was competing, was doing very well, and scratched. And then there was a post on Facebook explaining what had happened, which is that she took some liquid fuel out to her dogs to make a fire at one of the checkpoints, and then mistook the fuel for a water bottle and swallowed some of it. So she consulted with the vets who were there, and out of a overabundance of caution, they said, you really should go to the hospital and be checked out and make sure that you're okay. And she did, and she is fine. Apparently didn't swallow too much of it, but we've talked a lot in the past about when you're on one of these races, you don't get a lot of sleep, and sometimes you can start making little mistakes. Although I would imagine that's not something that a mistake she'll ever make again.
Right. Yeah, I guess she had it in some type of water bottle or a soda bottle, something like that, instead of a container that she normally fixes. I think from what I read, she left that her normal container back at the previous checkpoint or something like that.
Yeah, that's what my understanding is as well.
And also in the Yukon Quest, Catherine Keith, who runs with John Baker, had to scratch. I guess she ended up breaking her wrist coming down one of the summits. Either it was I guess it was Rosebud Summit. Is that right? On that story where she crashed, ended up breaking her wrist, and had to push the button and finish her race there.
Right. And in the big Yukon Quest, in the Yukon Quest 1,000-miler, right now out in front are Alan Moore and Paige Drobny. And for people who may not be too familiar or who may have forgotten about this, usually what happens with the SP Kennels is that Alan Moore will run the A team in the Yukon Quest, and then they will switch, and Ali Zirkle will run that A team in Iditarod. So almost every year, most of the dogs that Alan is running in the Yukon Quest will be the dogs that Ali runs in the Iditarod.
Right, for sure. And as we mentioned, they're making their way to Eagle, then across the border there and into Dawson, where they'll take a 36-hour break, so about a day and a half of camping there in the historic city of Whitehorse, and they're making their way down to Dawson City. I said Whitehorse. Making their way down to Whitehorse to finish the race. And as you know, for folks that are listening, they flip-flop every year. So this is the year that it started in Fairbanks and will end in Whitehorse. And then, of course, next year will be the following route. Any other race news that we want to mention before we jump into the topic of the day?
Just quickly, you had alluded to the 36-hour stop, and that's something that really is unique to the Yukon Quest and makes it a very different experience. One of the things that makes it a very different experience from Iditarod. At this 36-hour rest, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the handlers can really step in and really do the majority of stuff taking care of the dogs just for those 36 hours. So it gives the musher a chance to really catch up on sleep and to really, get more rested for that final push.
Right, and those same handlers, as we've just got off of the road system there past Circle and Central here on the Alaska side of the trail, often those handlers will really have to put the pedal to the metal on the dog truck and drive hundreds of miles up and back around to Dawson, all the way back down to Anchorage, cross over the border, then down through Whitehorse and back up to Dawson in order to, depending on which way you go, or through Tok and then down to Dawson. But yes, the mushers then will have that 36-hour break. while their dogs are taken care of by the handlers, and often the handlers get there a day or so ahead of time, and they'll set up a big tent-like thing with tarps and things where the dogs can be bedded down for a day and a half, and they'll do all of the care for the dogs, or at least most of the care, feeding and working with their feet and massages and all that. And you'll often find that the mushers will take advantage of that, and some of them will even grab a hotel room for the night so they can get a good night's rest. And some of them, of course, live it up a little bit in Dawson. I guess Dawson is a big party town, so they'll be frequenting the bars and the restaurants and really enjoying the festivities that go along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And always at the back of their mind, though, they still have about half of the race left to run.
Right. Yeah. So you can't party too hard. I know sometimes it's fun to let loose a little bit, but yeah, if you still have 500 or so miles to go, it's definitely in that back of your mind to take care of things. So Alex, let's jump on over to the story of the week here. You and I talked a little bit about it off air. It's a big story locally and in particular on all the Facebook groups that talk about Iditarod and mushing. It is about a report that was released about a week and a half or so ago that a company did for Iditarod to talk about sort of the goings on with the board and all of the things that have happened over the last year, and recommended some changes. And one thing in particular was about who is currently on the board and what they can do to rectify that, and sort of the relationship that they have with the mushers. What are your thoughts on that? Then we'll jump into some commentary.
Yeah, well, first of all, I believe this was supposed to be a confidential report. So the reason we know about it is that someone, and it's not really clear who at the moment, leaked it to the press. That was done by this consulting group to try to look at the problems that Iditarod has been facing with the doping scandal and several other things in the past few years, losing a major sponsor in Wells Fargo. And just this consulting group was looking at how can the Iditarod make some changes in order to keep being the type of major sport that it's been in Alaska and the type of major event that it's been for mushing. And it's a difficult thing. I don't want to be too critical, but as we've discussed in the past, it seems like there are some very serious issues that maybe haven't been addressed by the current board, or maybe there are things that the current board thought might get better on their own. And it really looks like this is the time where there could be some big changes that would really address some of these concerns, and that would really, put the Iditarod back on a more solid footing.
Right, and some of the thoughts that were talked about on social media and commented on the the pages or the article was one thing that they're worried about is conflict of interest, and in particular on the mushers side. And I guess a lot has been talked about with Rick Swenson, the only 5-time winner of Iditarod, and whether he has some type of conflict of interest with Dallas have winning 4. What is your thought about that? And do you think that that's a big deal?
I'm not sure that particular case is a big deal. I think the general issue of conflict of interest is a pretty big deal. There are board members who are CV family members who, I'm sure are trying to be impartial, but I think it's difficult to be that impartial when you're ruling on something major that affects your family directly. And I'm not impugning anyone who's on the board, but it certainly seems like in the past these ideas of conflicts have just been swept aside, and maybe there needs to be some way of addressing it. Maybe people who have conflicts shouldn't vote on certain issues. I'm not really sure, but I do know that there traditionally has not been all that much transparency from the ITC board, and they've been a very protective group, and they've made their decisions, and then the mushers and the fans just have to live with the decisions. So I think it would go a long way towards helping the sport if there was a way to have just more transparency in how these things work and how these decisions are made.
If you think about the corporate culture, in particular in America, as we know, if it's a public company, a publicly traded company like on the stock market, et cetera, they have to do all sorts of things to be transparent. They have to do quarterly reports and that sort of thing to make sure that they're the up and up. And of course, they're answering to their shareholders, the people that own the company stock, whom what they're for. But it's a little bit different with a nonprofit, which is what the Iditarod is. Is there necessarily a need for transparency for the public versus the inner workings of with the board and the people that are involved with Iditarod? Do you think that they need to go out of their way to be transparent on board related things? Maybe of course the race in general, about things that are happening on the trail, but what about just the day-to-day operations? Do you think there needs to be a lot of transparency there? And if so, or if not, are they required to as a nonprofit?
I'm not an expert in this, but my understanding is that legally they are not. There are certain legal filings they have to make with the government, presumably with the state of Alaska, but there's not a legal requirement in general for a lot of transparency. I think the danger here is that a lot of what makes Iditarod possible is the fans and the followers having faith in the race and in the purity of the race. And there have been a few things that have happened that we've talked about that have maybe shaken some people's faith a little bit. And in my mind, the real danger is that at some point, if a few more things happen, we could reach some kind of tipping point, and then fans could really just pull back from their support of Iditarod, and that would be devastating. We talk a lot about how expensive it is to put on this race and how dependent they are on the volunteers who come up to Alaska or come from different places in Alaska on their own dime just because they love the sport and they want to support it. And many thousands and tens of thousands more will buy the subscription so that they can watch the insider videos or they can follow the tracker. If a significant portion of those people stopped doing those things that bring money into Iditarod, that would be a huge crisis.
So I know we've compared and contrasted a lot with the NFL in regards to Iditarod, sort of the two big boys in their respective sports. And in the NFL this year in particular, there was a lot of hubbub about the folks kneeling for the national anthem and that sort of thing, and it caused quite a bit of PR stir for the NFL, and they were saying that people were leaving in droves in terms of watching the games and that sort of thing. But then you think about something like the Super Bowl, which just happened this past weekend, where well over 100 million people tuned in to watch the game. I guess where I'm going with this, Alex, is do you think it's just a handful of people, and that handful could be many? It could be tens, hundreds, even thousands of people for both sports, whether it's Iditarod or the NFL, who say they're going to do something, and then they're very vocal about it, and then they may in fact do it. They may quit watching or quit attending or whatever, but I don't think that that's the majority for both sports. I think there's still a core group of fans with the Iditarod and with the NFL who it doesn't really matter what's happening per behind the scenes, as long as everything's safe. They aren't really worried about it, as long as their event is still on TV or whatever, as long as they can still cheer for their sport. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that's the case with a lot of things. There's a very vocal minority who tries to raise a stink. And for the majority of people, they are fine with it. Uh, and there's always going to be, whether it's the NFL or sled dog racing, there's always going to be a very dedicated group of kind of super fans. And then there's much more casual fans, the people who will only tune into the NFL to watch the Super Bowl, or the people who will only start paying attention to mushing when the Iditarod starts. Uh, and and it's that group of casual fans that I think are more likely to be swayed. The super fans will always be there. The opponents will always not be there, but there's a large group of people in the middle who enjoy the sport and like the sport, and I think those are the people that it's important to appeal to. Um, we were looking at the budget of Iditarod. Unlike the NFL, which is kind of a money machine, the Iditarod is relatively small, and it gets by uh, with a lot of with a lot of stuff that is frankly not as solid as it could be. And so my concern as a fan of the race is I want to make sure that things are as solid as they can be, so that we're not in the position where suddenly the Iditarod is looking at a major revenue deficit, for example, and they have to start slashing the purse, or making radical changes that would hurt the race.
So, as one of these super fans or mega fans, I guess that you could consider yourself as one of these folks that talks about Iditarod all year long, of course, on this show. But you're also one that pays for the insider. You are not that casual person that just checks the Facebook page on every morning when you wake up during Iditarod. Do you think that who is on the board or what they're doing behind the scenes really matters that much to you and to your friends who are these super fans, or do you think that it's much more of a hubbub about just something to raise a story or to raise controversy? I don't know. I don't see it as a big a deal as a lot of folks. Of course, I want to make sure that the races ran competently and everything is happening the way it should be. But I really don't care what's happening on the board meetings. I don't care if John Smith is the president or Julie Jones is the vice president or the secretary or whatever. And I of course don't have any voice to say who should be there. I'm not part of the Iditarod organization. I don't have a vote or anything like that. So I think there's just a lot of musings going around that don't necessarily need to happen. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're right, and part of this um, goes to the whole controversy with Dallas, and Dallas really, I think, has stuck out a position where he wants a complete overhaul of the board. He wants I'm not sure exactly who, but I know that he wants a bunch of people in the board gone. Uh, I don't I don't really know. I don't know these people, and I'm not really sure what they do on the board. So I look at it kind of as a black box as well. I just want the race to be run well, and for the most part, as far as I can see, it is being run well. There's a bunch of things that have happened last year and a bunch of controversy in the off season this year that I think has made people question that. Um, but I'm with you. I'm not entirely sure that getting rid of the entire board and bringing in other people would make that much of a difference. On the other hand, there are a lot of people on the board who've been on the board for a very long time, and maybe it would help to bring in some new blood. It's such an insider thing that I'm not really sure how to evaluate it.
But I think you and I can both agree that whoever would come up, for one of these vacant board positions would already have some type of insider track. I mean, it's not going to be somebody, just with brand new, fresh cut teeth, as they say. It's going to be
Right.
somebody with a heck of a lot of experience. It could be somebody that's sort of in the weeds right now, and not a lot of folks know about. That would be the next up and coming folks on that board. Yes, a lot of these folks have been around for a very long time, and as they say, there could be benefit to having quote unquote new blood on the board to make things more more up to date, so to speak, sort of the new lingo and the way things happen. But I don't know if that would be necessarily the case. In regards to your comment about Dallas saying that he wants the entire board sort of worked over and changed. Isn't that sort of the have your cake and eat it too? That sort of thing where if you don't like something, preach till they change it. That just seems like if a person doesn't get their way, and it maybe or maybe not Dallas, but if they don't get their way, all of a sudden they're expecting change. Things just don't work like that in the real world, do they?
No, they don't. And I'm not really sure I'm not sure what Dallas really wants, and maybe Dallas isn't even sure what he wants, because certainly there are people on the board who support Dallas. So I would assume that he would want to keep those people around. Um, and as you and I have discussed before, it really seems, from what we know about this whole doping uh, uh, thing, it really seems like the board went out of their way in certain respects to protect Dallas and to help him. So I'm not exactly sure what it is that he wants, and maybe angry, and he doesn't like this sort of attention, and he doesn't like focus of this kind of thing, and maybe he's just looking to take the attention off of.
Sorry about that, guys. Alex and I have a bad Skype connection, but we'll pick up the show right here. My last question to you, Alex, is what do you think that's going to happen in the future? I know one prominent musher said on social media right after this report that he would like to have the board resign immediately and new people be replaced even before the upcoming Iditarod, which is only about a month away. I don't think that that's really realistic. I think that if something were to happen, it would happen in the off season. So I guess it's sort of a two-part question. Do you think anything's going to happen before Iditarod? And if so, what do you think that will be? And then secondly, where do you see it going forward here in the off season?
Go ahead. I don't think anything will happen before Iditarod, just because there's literally not enough time for it. There's a lot of things that have to happen in the next couple of weeks, and you really need to have people who are already in those positions. You can't be training someone and at the same time preparing for Iditarod. I think that I think it might help to have some of the board replaced, or at least to bring in some new board members. There's something really to be said for having institutional knowledge and for having people who've been around the race for 20 or 25 years, who know how things were handled in the past, who know when things went right, what happened, and when things went wrong, what happened. So I'm not in favor of just throwing everybody out. I don't think that would ultimately be helpful.
Yeah, I agree with you fully. Yeah, I don't think anything's going to happen in the next month or so. I think that there'll still be a lot of talk about this, in particular on social media, everybody weighing in with their thoughts and opinions. But I just don't see anything happening up until then. As we know with a lot of things like this, a lot of the things have already been put in motion for this year. Everything except for the final trail work and that sort of thing is already out on the table and ready to go. I don't think there's a heck of a lot of board type decisions that are going to happen between now and the first weekend of March that are going to have a detriment on this year's race. I don't think any major sponsors are going to pull out or any new sponsors are going to come in or anything like that. I think we'll just kind of breeze through this year's Iditarod and see what happens afterwards, if anything happens. They may just take the report and just take it as recommendations and go with it. Just because a report says something or another doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to act on that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they play out. So Alex, anything that you want to mention in closing before we go? And I do want to drop a plug here and let folks know that we just finished up our first full season of storytelling here on Mushing Radio with the Serum Run, a great 10-part series. You can check that out on our feed over on iTunes. Anything you want to mention in closing?
Just want to briefly say that this is going to be Dee Dee Genreau's last Iditarod. She's announced. Always a fan favorite, and I think all of us who've been following the sport for a while know what an amazing competitor she is and how much she has brought to this race. So just very, very happy to have been able to meet her a couple of times and to have been able to watch her all of these years. And if you're looking for someone who would be great on the ITC board after this year, I think Dee Dee Genreau is the
I agree with you there for sure. Okay, Alex, that is it. We're out of time. Make sure you check out Alex over on Twitter. You can find him at Coldfoot Films, and I am at Robert Forto. Make sure you check out our website at dogworksradio.com. And if you like or have a comment about our show, please leave that comment and review as well. We look forward to those. Alex, we'll talk to you guys next time, okay?
All right. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
Did you know that Alaska Dog Works trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.
Hi guys, it's Alex. If you are a fan of sled dog sports and the Iditarod, Mushing Radio is the show for you. Each Wednesday we drop a new episode on Dogworks Radio, so be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from.
If you like our podcast, there are a few things you can do. You can take a couple of minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also check out all of our Dogworks Radio sponsors and promotions in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go over to Facebook, like our Facebook page, and one last thing, please tell all of your friends by spreading the word about Dogworks Radio. Thank you so much for listening to us. We really appreciate you.
Dogworks Radio is produced by Robert Forto. Logo art by Angry Squirrel Studios. Dogworks Radio is produced in conjunction with KVRF 89.7 in Palmer, Alaska.
For dog training advice, you can contact Alaska Dogworks at 907-841-1686 or visit their website at alaskadogworks.com. If you have a show idea or would like to be a guest, please contact us by sending an email to live@dogworksradio.com.